Yes, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Tribe channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back with you on this beautiful um, beautiful Saturday night. Apologies for being 1 hour late because trust me, that was not my own making. A lot has happened today. That unfortunately I'm not at liberty to discuss on this forum, but just know it was never intended for me to be late on here. Anyways, I hope you're doing okay. I hope you've had a wonderful Saturday. Arsenal fans have been the most, I think I've been the loudest or the most excited following that late victory against Everton. Well, they were meant to work for it, and well, boy, did they work for it. And eventually, they got what they deserved, I must say. Youngster Max Dowman, they are salvaging it for the Arsenal. You could see the pressure sort of kick in. You could see Mikel Arteta. Mikel Arteta is known for being unmated on the touchline, but today he was unmated by pressure, not by the events of the game. At least prior to prior to that goal, that goal from Victor Gyökeres going in. So we'll be discussing that. We'll be talking about Bayern Munich, who shared the spoils with Bayer Leverkusen. Bayern Munich getting 2 red cards in that fixture away to Bayer Leverkusen. And then also, we'll be discussing Manchester City, who are currently in action against West Ham, and that goal is still 1-1 as we speak. About 58 minutes thereabout have been played thus far. The action is still ongoing between the two sides. So beautiful game of football that we are following up on in as far as the Premier League is concerned. Then, of course, we'll get to go through all the other results from the day. Chelsea, Jesus Christ. I backed Chelsea to win today. And yet they decided they were going to lose against Newcastle. That single goal from Anthony Gordon, with Joe Willock providing the assist, sank Chelsea. I do not know where their sort of a mind or brains or head was at, but they did lose by a goal to nil against Newcastle. Guys, I hope you're able to hear me. Yes, I have BRX says, hey, I am from Nepal and I'll speak Nepali language to you, plus say this. Unfortunately, the last time I tried to speak somebody's language, I ended up saying words that were not worthy for my audience because I was reading a language that I did not understand. So thank you so much, BRX, for joining us. Unfortunately, please indulge me on this one. I will not read those words because I do not know what they translate to. It could be derogatory, it could be abusive, I do not know. But thank you so much for joining us. Guys, kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel if it's your first time here. I'm coming to you live from Kampala, Uganda. It's 16 minutes past midnight, which is, we are now into Sunday, the 15th of March 2026. Robert Kesakos is my name. And thank you so much for those of you that have just joined us. If you're new here, please consider subscribing to the channel. But thank you. Ben says hi. Hi, Ben. Lewandowski says hello Lewandowski, 2004. Then there's somebody, I think their name is Russian. I can't speak Russian, I can't pronounce Russian names, so you'll indulge me on that one. But thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're doing all right. So, and I hope I'm audible enough to you guys. Anyways, it's been an epic weekend. Like I said, Arsenal fans must be the happiest thus far. Because hello to you too, bro. I wish I could read your name, but unfortunately, my languages are limited. I can only speak to my audience in English. If it is the Ugandan audience, I can switch a little bit to my local language. So that's as much as I can go. The last time I tried to learn a different language, somebody gave me a word that was not so good to pronounce in front of an audience. So I'm very cautious, even though I would wish to learn some other languages. So, but thank you so much for those of you that have joined us on this beautiful evening. So the Premier League action has been quite entertaining this weekend thus far, depending on what depending on what team you pay allegiance to, because action kicked off with action kicked off earlier on with a couple of with a draw against between Burnley and AFC Bournemouth. I think we had predicted that one, although we had gone for a 1-1 draw for that. Then Brighton Sunderland when they beat them by a goal to nil, and then at 8:30 p.m. Newcastle Newcastle beat up against Chelsea by a goal to nil, while Arsenal had to grind it out to beat up against Everton by 2-1. The youngster, 16 years of age, Max Dowman, inspiring Arsenal to victory because he had the direct hand in both goals. He scored one while he provided the pre-assist to the other. Incredible, really incredible. And we will talk about the stubbornness of Mikel Arteta because the game ended with them having a player going off through injury, and that was Yohan Timber. I do not know whether it was a muscular injury or a groin, but he appeared to attach his groin and things like that. So we'll get to find out in a bit. As we speak, in the late kickoff from 11 p.m. East African time, Manchester City are still 1-1 away to West Ham United. Now, I've just learned a key fact. During the course of this game, Manchester City have scored the fewest number of goals in the second half ever since the turn of the new year. They've scored as few as 3 goals. That's on level with Crystal Palace. So it does not promise to be. That's not an ideal statistic to have, but Man City have enjoyed the majority of possession. They've created more chances. They've just not been clinical enough. As soon as they scored through Bernardo Silva with a very brilliant goal. By the way, guys, find time, go online and search for Bernardo Silva's goal. Oh my, what a brilliant goal that was. It's quite cheeky. It's elegant to watch, And then just minutes later, West Ham restored parity through Konstantinos Mavropanos, who headed home from Gerard Bowen's corner kick. So there was just a difference of 4 minutes between the 2 goals in the opening half, and that's why it is still 1-1. West Ham is one of those teams that have performed really well ever since the turn of the new year. They've performed much better than most teams and things like that. So we'll be getting all that in the course of this broadcast. But Manchester City are going to be desperate to win this game because Arsenal have won, and with that victory, they've gone 10 points clear of Manchester City prior to this game. And as we speak, if it does end in a 1-1 draw, or if it does end all square, then that means it will leave Arsenal 9 points ahead of a second-place Manchester City, albeit they have a game in hand. I do fancy Man City to win this game. My prediction was a 3-1 victory for Man City. I can only wait to see if it will be manifested. Of course, I've already gotten some predictions wrong. I thought Chelsea would beat up against Newcastle by 2-1. They lost by 1-0. I thought Arsenal would win by 2-1. Yes, they won by 2-0, keeping their 15th clean sheet of the season. That's for David Raya. So then also, my prediction for Brighton and Sunderland have been a 1-1 draw. Sunderland lost by 1-0. So basically, so far, that's what's happened as far as the Premier League is concerned. We'll have action tomorrow on Super Sunday. But remember, on Sundays, we do not have a morning broadcast. Yes, on Sunday, we do not have a morning broadcast as we do every single day, Monday to Saturday, coming to you at 9 a.m. and then on Saturdays at 10 a.m. So please bear that in mind. So why do we start it all? Briefly on the ongoing game between Manchester City and West Ham, maybe to highlight for you a couple of key statistics. Manchester City have had 2 shots on target. West Ham have had 1. Man City have had 6 shots on target, or 6 attempts on target, and 2 blocked shots. They've dominated possession to the tune of 70%, but like I've told you, they've created very few, clear-cut scoring chances that you think they should be barring away. Brad Erling Haaland just moments back, fired his attempt wide, and in terms of saves, Mads Hermansen has already made 1 brilliant save, while largely Gianluigi Donnarumma has been on holiday on the other side of the pitch. So Then in the game between Brighton and Sunderland, Sunderland had a goal ruled out for by VAR from Chris Rick, and then and then Yankuba Minte scored in the second half. Still, that was in the 58th minute to for a goal that turned out to be the match winner for Brighton on the day. So really, but I know where the gist of the conversation is that many of you are waiting for, but we're going to get there. Do not worry, guys. We're going to get there. We're going to get there because I'm sure Arsenal fans are really desperate to hear what's happened for them. Meanwhile, Juventus are leading a goal to nil against Udinese, while Real Madrid are in action against Elche. That game is also ongoing as we speak. And then in the CAF Confederations Cup, there's also a game in there, but we will not get to that. Chelsea, I must be honest. If you thought that Chelsea can beat up against PSG by 4-0 or by 3-0 to send the game to extra time, or beat them by 4-0 to advance directly in normal time, then you're going to have to think again, because that Chelsea backline, oh my God, they can be all over the place. They can mean to be all over the place. They can mean to be all over the place. And when you look at that goal that they conceded today against Anthony Gordon, I don't know. I really don't know what the defenders were up to, really. But it just, you could see whatever it is that they were cooking wasn't working out. Wasn't working out. Not one bit, you know. First of all, their recovery is poor, I think, or at least I do observe their recovery is quite poor, you know, and I think they should be doing much better in terms of their recovery. Today, I could see sort of the frustration of Liam Rasinia, because I think he thought the players were not executing his orders in the best way possible, or at least to the best of their abilities, or the way he expects them to do so. First of all, the game started with a bit of, I don't know how to call it. Now, Chelsea have, ever since the coming in of Liam Rasinia, they have a pre-match ritual. And in that pre-match ritual, it's like they converge around in a bit of a circle, and it's like a bit of a team talk. Whoever gives the pep talk, I am not sure. Now, today, they did that at the center of the pitch. That's at around Manchester City asking for penalty for what they deem has been a foul on Matas Nunes in the box there. So, in other words, so that pre-match ritual, I think it's a bit of a pep talk, motivation, whatever you may call it. So today, Paul Tierney, the center referee, is standing in the center, waiting to get the game started. And then suddenly, Chelsea players converge around him and they do their pre-match ritual or huddle. And I don't know how Paul Tierney felt about that. I don't know if he felt cornered. I don't know if he felt disrespected. I do not know. But what happened in the game sort of tells me that maybe he was not too pleased with the action, because meanwhile, Pep Guardiola is on the phone with his assistant, Pep Linders. Remember, Pep Guardiola is not on the touchline today because he got a yellow card in the 2-2 draw against, it was in the 3-1 victory against Newcastle. He got a yellow card, which means he has accumulated 6 yellow cards, and therefore he's been, he's been sort of, he was sent to the stand. He has a too-much ban for the accumulation of those yellow cards. And therefore, today, he's in the stand, and that's where he is basing to make phone calls or issue orders to his assistant, Pep Linders. And then the subsequent game, he will still be off. Is it supposed to be the next game? Because his next game is going to come against Arsenal in the EFL Cup final at Wembley. That's after they play Real Madrid in the reverse fixture at the Etihad City. Joseph says, blow me a kiss. Joseph, really? How do they blow a kiss? I don't know how they blow a kiss. Do they just, is that how they blow it? How do they blow a kiss? I don't know. Anyways, but thank you so much, Joseph, for joining us. But thank you so much for joining us. Meanwhile, Brad Erling Haaland has just missed an opportunity. Jeremy Doku there, laying it up for Brad Erling Haaland. He just needed to hit the target, and possibly Mads Hamilton wouldn't have caught his fingers that because he was looking for the bottom corner. I must be honest, Brad Erling Haaland has not been at it really that much thus far, especially ever since the turn of the new year. He's been out of form, and yet Pep Guardiola went with a very, very strong starting 11, in as far as today's game was concerned. Because it's a kind of fixture that has had Bernardo Silva, he's an attacking midfielder, has had Ryan Chaki, has had Omar Mamosh, Jeremy Doku. Jeremy Doku just got brought on in place of Ryan Ashnory. But how they started, they had Omar Mamosh with Brad Erling Haaland, with Antoine Semenyo, Bernardo Silva, and Nico O'Reilly. So they've since made substitutions, withdrawing Ryan Cheki bringing on Ryan Cheki for Omar Mamosh, and then bringing on Jeremy Doku for Ryan Ashnory. That means Nico O'Reilly goes to left back, and then they have more firepower in the width, and they start West Ham being stretched, and you can sort of see they're having to dig in deep. Now, it's not very uncommon for a Nuno Espirito Santo side to have to dig in deep and defend quite solidly. He used to do all that when he was still at Wolverhampton Wanderers, at Nottingham Forest. He did that tremendously well. So, whereas I think eventually West Ham will concede, or are going to concede, I do feel that when it comes to a manager that can coach his team through that kind of football, or that may have sort of prepared his team for this kind of game, it is Nuno Espirito Santo. So anyways, let's quickly, but okay, I need to find the Real Madrid game, guys. I need to find that game. I need to find the Real Madrid game, and I see if we can sort of keep up, because Real Madrid, it's a game of pressure, really, really big pressure for Real Madrid. Have just scored to make it 3-0 against Elche. I think it's Dean Howson or Dean Hewson who has scored. Dean Howson. Is it Dean Howson or the youngster? Come on. Yeah, it's Dean Howson that has scored. Let's see. Allow me have a look at that goal before we proceed any further. That's a free header. Looks like Real Madrid has given some young kids a chance, or youngsters. Jeremy Doku is going to be a bit of a nightmare for this West Ham backline. He will keep coming at them until they tire, until they let loose. But Real Madrid's goals have been scored through Antonio Rudiger, Fede Valverde, who scored a hat-trick in midweek against Manchester City, and Dean Hewson or Dean Howson. They have Thibaut Courtois in goal, Dani Carvajal, Antonio Rudiger, Dean Howson, Fran Garcia, Fede Valverde, Thiago Pina, Chouameni, and Eduardo Camavinga, Brahim Diaz, and Vinicius Jr. Those were the starters for Real Madrid. But they have since made changes. They've since made changes, bringing on Adagula, Gonzalo Garcia for Vinicius Jr. and Federico Valverde, respectively. Daniel Yanez, who provided the assist for Dean Howson's goal, came on for Chouameni. Antonio Rudiger was withdrawn for Diego Aguado, while Cesar Palacios came on for Thiago Pina, as well as Brahim Diaz, paving the way for Manel Angelo. That's for Real Madrid. So Real Madrid are in action there. So now Chelsea, we are still talking about the Chelsea game. They were not without their chances. They had their chances. For example, in the first half, before even Newcastle score, they had Wesley Fofana had a header and he put that over the bar with very little or no pressure on him. And then Cole Palmer had an attempt from inside the area and he put it wide of the mark. Then there was an attempt from, I think, outside the box by Enzo Fernandez. And instead of ducking, Cole Palmer blocked it, or he blocked it, so much to his agony, and it looked agonizing for. It looked really, really agonizing to be them. Now, to be honest, when the goal comes, you must feel for. Before you blame the Chelsea defense, the midfield watched on. They do not close the Newcastle player down. I don't remember the Newcastle player exactly who plays the pass from deep in midfield. It's sort of a line splitting pass. So you have in that frame, you have Garnacho, you have another Chelsea player in between the Newcastle player that makes the pass. Ahead of them, you have Moises Caicedo, you have a retreating Reece James, you have a Trevor Chalobah, who for some reason had dropped off to more like the right back position. Then you have Wesley Fofana on the other side. I don't know who is tracking. And then you have Malo Gusto. Now, my concern is with basically with Reece James and is with Reece James and Fofana, I think, because they get so caught up. They get so caught up because I'm thinking to myself, first of all, Reece James was played in midfield. So you had him and Moises Caicedo in the area. They are beaten because they should be the first line of defense, and they are beaten. Then you have, like I said, you have Trevor Chalobah, who had drifted off to the left back position, and then when you freeze that moment, it looks ugly. He had drifted off to the left back position because Kukurea was still deep. He was just crossing the halfway line, returning. And then they play that line splitting pass, and Reece James tries to catch up, and he knew that anything he would do on Joe Willock would have culminated to possibly just fouling him and maybe getting a red card for it. So, and then Robert Sanchez had to crawl in trying to latch onto that ball, but he could not get his fingers to it, and that's the goal that decided the tie. On the other side, Cole Palmer had an attempt from distance, but Aaron Ramsdale was there to to the rescue. He sort of looked okay ever since he came in for Nick Pope, other than the Man City game that they lost by 3-1, because in that game, I thought he could have done better, particularly in the first goal that they conceded, the equalizer through Savinho, because I think it was Jeremy Doku that lays on that ball, and it sort of cuts through a forest of legs, and Ramsdale could not come and collect. So then Chelsea had their moments, like I said. They're just not clinical on the day. But then also credit to Newcastle, because they really, really defended well. They defended well. Aaron Ramsdale was called into action on a couple of occasions, including through Liam Delap, who forced him into a save. Robert Sanchez on the other side was tested in his own ways, but Chelsea just could not find the way through to get the result. Raymond Kangumba says, hi, Chelsea versus Newcastle United. Eddie Howe, give him credit for how, and my man of the match is Anthony Gordon for Newcastle United. I'm happy Newcastle won. That's from Ray. Thank you so much, Ray, for your kind comment and your contribution to the discussion and the debate tonight. So, like I said, I do. If any of us has an imagination that Chelsea can beat up against PSG by 3-0, It's not impossible. It is very possible because they've done it before. They did it in the finals of the FIFA Club World Cup. But this Chelsea side this season, in terms of defending, have not looked anywhere near good enough or consistent enough to keep clean sheets. They've kept a couple of clean sheets, statistically speaking, but oftentimes their backline will let loose. Because when you go to goalkeepers with the most clean sheets, you'll find, of course, David Raya is in a world of his own. Okay, at least ahead by 4, because today he kept his 15th clean sheet of the season. That's 2 more than he managed the entirety of last season with 7 games left to play for Arsenal. But Robert Sanchez has 9, and I do not have any recollection of Felipe Jorgensen keeping any clean sheet in the Premier League. So that defense is so leaky. And again, we saw the complacency in the final 15 minutes in their loss to PSG, which they lost by 5-2. They played well for the first 70 minutes, did everything right. And I remember when this draw was done for the UEFA Champions League for Chelsea and PSG, I did tip Chelsea to go through over 2 legs. But those final minutes, those final 15 minutes of the game really had me rethinking my position on that one because, oh man, Chelsea, did they let loose? You have the mistake from the goalkeeper, Felipe Jorgensen, who has since been withdrawn. Of course, he did not start today's game. He makes a mistake with the blind pass that is intercepted by Bradley Barcola before Vitinha scores. Then Chelsea do not close down Kvicha Kvaratskhelia. He scores a stunning goal. And then the way Akraf Hakimi plays the cutback in there, and nobody is there to cut it out or to even close down Kvicha Kvaratskhelia before he taps it in. Of course, I thought the goalkeeper should have tried and saved that one, but, they look like a team that is bound to concede at any given one point. And that's why it doesn't give me much confidence going into that reverse fixture. So Chelsea, perhaps miracles can happen, but I do not see how Chelsea make their miracle on this one when it comes to, keeping out PSG in the reverse fixture. Unless otherwise, they will need a performance much more improved than they offered today and then they offered on Wednesday night. So yeah, I will leave that at that. Okay, so anyways, let's move on to the Arsenal game. But as we move on, that game between Manchester City and West Ham is still 1-1 as we speak, with a couple of minutes left to play. West Ham have really defended well thus far. I still have a feeling they could concede. Real Madrid 3-0 up against Elche. That's the game that is ongoing in the Spanish La Liga. There was a game in the Italian Serie A, but it is finished between Juventus and Udinese. Juventus have won that one by 1-0. So let's move on to the Arsenal game. I know that's where perhaps most people want to hear it all, because Arsenal won. Everton made them work for it, but in the end, they're the ones that gave it away. Meanwhile, Chelsea also had a moment when they hit the best of the upright through Reece James's free kick. He's very good, by the way, on dead ball situations. He's very good in dead ball situations, and I think, I don't know, Chelsea should be looking to win more free kicks outside the area because he's good at slicing them. He scored a couple, But yeah, I don't know, guys. Maybe we take a bit of a pause. West Ham clear the lines. Man City do not often score from corner kicks, but here they made that one look close. So, guys, for those of you that were part of our preview today, actually, yes, today morning, yesterday night, Friday morning, but particularly yesterday night, when we were doing the preview for the Arsenal-Everton game, I talked about changes that Mikel Arteta needed to make changes to rotate his team a little bit, and he did that. Victor Gyökeres started off the bench. He started with Kai Havertz up front. Not that he had a good day, but at least he was started. At left back, they started with Carafiori. That was check. In midfield, he did not make any changes. I was a bit disappointed on that one. And at right back, and that's Urian Timber goes off injured. And I said this, and I've been saying it for quite some time, almost coming on to a month now, that Mikel Arteta will play Urian Timber into an injury. And basically, if today is anything to go by, he did just that. Urian Timber, good as he looks, he's looked off of it for quite some good time. In the way he bursts forward, in the way he tucks into midfield, whether it's a tactical change or otherwise, how sometimes he sort of scraps defensively because he's tired. He's a bit fatigued. He's played too many minutes for this Arsenal side. And once I saw Ben White, once again, on the bench, I was thinking to myself, if he made it the bench in midweek, and you have him on the bench, why not start him? Of course, he had to come off in the end, in the first half. First of all, he went down and needed treatment. It appeared like it was an issue with his knee. He came back, played on, but still you didn't feel like he had a lot of comfort. And then eventually he gets withdrawn for Christian Mosquera. Christian Mosquera coming on, he did okay. I thought there were moments in which he looked shaky. He really looked shaky. But in the end, he fared on okay. He just did enough to get by, you know. It wasn't an incredible performance. It wasn't an incredible cameo, you know, in my opinion. Then, among the changes that I was asking for was Max Dowman. And I remember saying that I said, I knew, as much as I would have loved him to start, I knew he was not going to start. But I said he must give him some minutes. He must be able to trust that young man. I know the risk is too high for him. A lot is at stake for him, for Mikel Arteta as a manager. And he thinks he's better off going with what he knows. In other words, the devil he knows is better than the angel he doesn't know. In that sort of sense, for lack of a better description. And I said, look here, Barcelona have trusted Lamine Yamal. Lamine Yamal is currently 18. Last season he was 17. He was incredible. This season, incredible still. But in his debut season, that was the 2023-2024 campaign, and Xavi Hernandez as manager. He trusted him coming from the academy, and he gave him game time. And in some games, he had the impact. And look what the kind of player that they have on their hands. So sometimes, Manchester City were close to making it 2-1, but unfortunately, that one, I don't know how, it ricocheted to the goalkeeper. I think it was off Brad Erling Haaland. Brad Erling Haaland has been hurt in his quadrants, but he has to pick himself up. West Ham are botting the balls away. Brad Erling Haaland goes on with a bit of discomfort. We all know how sensitive that part is. But Manchester City are really, really stretching West Ham to the best of their ability. But are yet to yield, are yet to get that goal. Are yet to get that goal that they really need in this game to win it. I still have hope that they will win. If anything, Arsenal's game today is evidence that You just need to hang in there, and eventually you'll you'll get the goal. Pep Guardiola watches on from the director's box at the London Stadium. 4 minutes will be added. I don't know whether he will be too pleased with that. Let's see. Ryan Cherki floats this one in. Oh, goes out for a corner kick. Guys, indulge me on this one. Let's first watch the Man City game and see it through, and then we'll get to the review of Arsenal's performance, because I don't want to make half a statement about Arsenal and then shout to you about Manchester City in regards to what is happening in their game. Here they come again. It's a corner. Mad Samanson gathers. It's been quite good today. He's been very, very alert. For a goalkeeper who Graham Potter brought in from Leicester City and sort of had a struggling start before they reverted back to, there's an own goal in the Real Madrid game from Manel Angelo. So it is 3-1 between Real Madrid and Elche. That game is in the 84th minute. Speaking about Matt Hermanson, so he had a very difficult start in life at West Ham because they were having a difficult start to the season, so much so that they ended up sacking the manager in Graham Potter. Before sacking manager Graham Potter and replaced him with Nuno Espirito Santo. So once it did not work out for them, they brought in Alfonso Areola. And I remember at the time, they went and recalled, what's his name? Lucas Fabianski to return as their third choice goalkeeper. They had let him go at the end of his contract, so they had to, bring him back in. But Alfonso Areola came back in goal. But even he has not been that convincing. He's not been that good, really. He's not been that good, really, in my opinion. So they've sort of lived life through sort of phases. Matt Hermanson comes in for a couple of games. Once he's dropped form dips, then Alfonso Areola comes in and things like that. Basically, that's how they've gone through it. Meanwhile, there's been an injury on Konstantinos Mavropanos. It appears to be a head injury. I'm not particularly sure, but it appears to be a head injury. I think from a block that he did, and he's needed medical treatment. Oh, Jesus Christ, that's nasty. Wow, Adagula was this close to making it 4-1 for Real Madrid. Yes, Brad Erling Haaland's strike is what hits Mavropanos' head. So it's a head injury, and player had to be stopped. It was Haaland's strike, so he did not block it, he did not head it, it just marked his head. And if you've ever played football, you know the difference between you heading the ball and the ball hitting you on the head. You surely know the difference. Now, remember he scored the equalizer for West Ham in this game, Konstantinos Mavropanos. I remember back in the days when I was still playing a bit of football, as a child, as a young boy growing up, that kind of thing. It came a time when I would not hit the ball while I was playing. Why? Because I had had a nasty experience. One time, when you're learning football and you do not know much, so I attempted to head the ball. But instead of moving towards the ball to head the ball, I sort of stood there. I sort of stood there like a ship waiting to be head-butted by another ship, kind of. And then the ball smacked me on the head. Of course, it went back. Brilliant defending. But oh my, it never felt the same for me. So I had not yet learned that if you, let's say, jump, or even if you're not jumping, if you make the head movement to head the ball, the impact is not the same as you standing by and waiting for the ball to hit you on the head, even though you intend to head it. So basically, that is what happened to me. So, and I remember that experience came as early as primary school. And from then on, I just said, me with heading the ball, no, 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 no. So it's not that I never did it again, but off. Mark Gahey just missed the golden opportunity to win it for Manchester City. Meanwhile, if you've seen my reaction, then you should see the one of Pep Guardiola. Meanwhile, Real Madrid have scored to make it 4-1. It's 4-1 at the Santiago Bernabeu against Elche. Beautiful, beautiful goal. I think it's Adagula. Oh, brilliant defending. Nico O'Reilly's first attempt was blocked, and then Mark Gahey with the rebound, and then he put that over the bar from close range. And that's how unfortunate football can feel or can turn out to be, that you're this close and then it's still, you still for some reason can't hit the target. Oh my, oh my. What a goal from Adagula. What a goal from Adagula. You know, one of those goals when the goalkeeper is off of his line and Jesus Christ. You know, before you, as you approach the center arc, that's the distance from which Adagula scored from. He noticed the Elche goalkeeper was way off his line and he went long and he scored. What a brilliant goal. What a brilliant goal. I'm sure Arsenal fans are out there praying that this game for Man City and West Ham does end the way it is. It's currently 1-1. Referee Michael Oliver is in charge of that game, by the way. Meanwhile, I was watching a podcast by Mark Goldbridge of That's Football and Robert Lyle. And I remember his prediction for this game was a 1-1 draw. And then Mark Goldbridge said Man City were going to lose. Of course, I did not believe them because I did not see how Man City were losing or how they were even drawing, given what is at stake for them, you know. And first of all, given that they needed a response from their sort of defeat against Real Madrid in midweek, I thought they needed a response from that. And I thought this match would be the perfect game for them to make the response because they've had a brilliant record against Manchester City. It's all over. Manchester City 1, West Ham United 1. Wow. You can see the frustration on those Manchester City players because they did everything they needed to do besides putting the ball in the back of the net. I would qualify to say that they were unlucky. But wow, guys, Adagula's goal. Previously, you've seen Wayne Rooney score a similar goal. I think David Beckham scored a similar goal. Who else? Somebody else that scored a similar goal. That kind of goal from distance. But wow. Wow. Manchester City 1, West Ham United 1 at full time. I did not see that coming. I did not see that coming. But we know for a fact that in football, anything is possible. Guys, what's your reaction on that Manchester City draw? Man City 1, West Ham 1. And I remember saying this, but I was saying it about Arsenal. There is a video on the channel where I was discussing the reasons as to why, in my opinion, I think the title race is not yet over. And while focusing on Arsenal, in their then remaining 8 games, I mentioned fixtures that they do have. Among those fixtures, 3 of them are London derbies against West Ham, against Crystal Palace, and the other is against Fulham. Yes. And I remember saying, first of all, West Ham are fighting against relegation. Two, they've cost Arsenal points before in a title race. You remember that 2-all draw at the London Stadium. Then we know that Fulham have done the same before. I think it was last season, they beat Arsenal by 2-1 at Craven Cottage before, I think that was prior to the 2-all draw that did happen at the Emirates Stadium. So, meanwhile, Thibaut Courtois is still coming to the rescue of Real Madrid with some brilliant saves against Elche. That game is in the 93rd minute of the game. 5 minutes of added time were added on there. So, I was focused on Arsenal. And the reason that's why I was focused on Arsenal are thinking or trying to pinpoint or think of games in which they are capable of dropping points. Why? Because historically, there's evidence of them dropping points against those very teams in the running for a Premier League title. We remember that in the 2022-2023 campaign. We remember that in the subsequent season, 2023-2024, and then last season. So different teams, but some of these teams are on. I think Southampton and Bournemouth, where they came in the first season. Brighton came in the subsequent season, if I'm not mistaken. No, I think they came in the 2023 season when they beat up against Arsenal by, was it 3-0 or 3-1? So, and then on the other side, in contrast, we have Manchester City, who we know that is capable of going on those runs at the tail end of the season of winning 10, 13, 14 consecutive games in that respect. Again, based on their pedigree and the historical context that they've done it before, and not just once, but multiple times. I did not envision that at this point in the season, Manchester City will draw 2 consecutive games. You remember when Arsenal drew 2 consecutive games against Brentford and against Wolverhampton Wanderers? You remember that? And every Arsenal fan out there was worried. They knew, some thought, some lost the hope. So there was a loss of hope and faith in that Arsenal team because they had drawn those games. And it was not just about how they dropped the points. It wasn't just about the dropping of the points, but also how they played in dropping those points. They had very wanting performances. So what eventually ended up happening was that it brought back Manchester City into the title race. And once Man City came back in the title race, it always felt like it was going to be difficult for Arsenal because they were bound to start playing catch-up. And that was so more particular because when Arsenal drew against Wolverhampton Wanderers by 2-2, the narrative was, and I remember I was one of those carrying it, Man City have a game in hand, and they still do. That's a statement of fact. So it's not like it's a bad thing. And then, of course, you make these assumptions because in an ideal world, they win that game. They beat up against Arsenal at the Etihad Stadium just as much as Arsenal can beat up against Man City at the Etihad Stadium. However, they've not beaten up against Manchester City, I think since about 2015 at the Etihad Stadium. So really, you can see why when I was making that submission, I clearly do not envision, or I do not even imagine, even though it is possible, that they're going to go to the Etihad Stadium and beat up against Man City. Last season they tried and they got reduced to 10 men with that red card to Leandro Trossard, and they ended up drawing by 2-2. Then the season prior to that, they had been accused of playing for a draw. When they went there, that was the 2023-2024 season. It ended in a goalless draw. And I remember, I think it was Rodrigo Hernandez Cascante who said, they came here to play for a draw. They did not come here to win, and something like that. Anyways, but the point I'm trying to make is that because of, for those of you that have watched Arsenal throughout the season, you know how sluggish they can be in some of their performances. And even today, it felt more that they were likely to drop points as the game wore on than it felt likely that they would eventually win. So with that, that's why I made that video to say the title race is not yet over. And even now, it is not yet over, in my opinion. But like I said in that very video, it is for Arsenal to lose. It is for Arsenal to lose. You know, it is for them to lose. That's what I believe. Because let's look at the Premier League table before we even get to review the Arsenal game. In as far as the Premier League table is concerned, Arsenal have 70 points with 7 games left to play. But we know that 7 games give you a total of 21 points. Manchester City have played a game less and are 9 points behind. In other words, Manchester City have 24 points to play for in their remaining 8 games. That game in hand is against Crystal Palace. They were supposed to play that game next weekend, but because next weekend it's going to be the Carabao Cup final at Wembley Stadium between Arsenal and Manchester City, that's why that game was postponed. And the time when Arsenal played Wolves, Crystal Palace would not play that game because they had a playoff game in the UEFA Conference League. So they will find an ideal date for that game to be played. But as we wait for it to be played, let's pull out the calculator and do a little bit of math in regards to what this implies for both teams. In other words, Arsenal 9 points ahead. Even if you were to assume that Manchester City have won that game in hand, this is an assumption, guys. Even if you are to assume that Man City, figuratively speaking, have beaten up against Crystal Palace, it would mean that they cut the deficit by 3 points from 9 to 6. So that means with 7 games left to play, Arsenal would still be 6 points clear at the top summit. That means both teams would then have 21 points left to play for. Mathematically, what that implies is that Manchester City are equally still in the title race, but it's not yet over still. And I do not think there's going to be any game that deludes into Pep Guardiola into thinking that it's done. Maybe he may start to think about it. As you know, thoughts, they creep up on you at the back of your mind that maybe it's over for us, but we'll keep on fighting. And the reason as to why he has to keep on fighting, or he cannot just give up and say it's done, is because he knows that his team has a history of coming from points behind and play catch up. Just the way Manchester City have dropped 4 points in the last 2 games is the same way Arsenal are capable of dropping similar number of points, if not even more. So, and also it is possible for Manchester City to go on and drop more points. Because guess what? Really, we do not know what is going to happen next week in the UEFA Champions League for both teams. Arsenal have to play Bayer Leverkusen. Man City have to play Real Madrid in the reverse fixture. The first leg for Arsenal ended 1-1. For Man City, it ended 3-1. In other words, nothing short of a win. And for Manchester City, a 4-0 win takes them through, or at least a 3-0 win in normal time, maybe after extra time, and it goes to penalties, whichever way they scrap themselves through. In other words, it has to be a definitive win for both teams to advance through. And then after that, after next weekend, we'll go into the March international break. And after the March international break, we will return. When we return, both teams will be playing in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup for the first weekend upon return from the March international break. And after that, they will then take on their responsibilities in the Premier League. Arsenal will be playing at home, I think, against AFC Bournemouth, while Manchester City will be playing away to Chelsea. So, whereas Chelsea have just gotten beaten by Newcastle, and that was, by the way, that was Liam Rassigna's second defeat in the Premier League, the first coming at the hands of Arsenal, just about a fortnight ago. So, the difficulty of that game would present Arsenal another opportunity. That causes us to perhaps have a look at the fixtures briefly for what would be match day 31. You know, sorry. Now, okay, match day 31 is next weekend because other teams will play their games on for match day 31. They'll play their games on. Man United will play on Friday against Bournemouth. Chelsea will be in action against Everton away and etc. etc. But the point I'm trying to make, okay, essentially, it will be match day 32. Arsenal will come in the early kickoff against FC Bournemouth at home. That same weekend, Manchester City will play on Sunday at 6:30 p.m. against Chelsea. In other words, if let's say Arsenal, because Arsenal will play a day earlier, the same way we make assumptions about Manchester City is the same way we can make them about Arsenal. So if Arsenal were to win that game, they would, as things stand, they would go 12 points clear of Manchester City as they wait for Man City to play on a Sunday. But also, because we made the other assumption that maybe Manchester City have won their game in hand, that victory, if they were to drop points against Chelsea, either in a draw or a loss, it would mean that Arsenal would still be either 8 points or 9 points clear of Manchester City. If they can win against Bournemouth, and then Manchester City falter against Chelsea. If it's a draw, it will leave Arsenal at 8 points. If it's a loss, it will leave Arsenal at 9 points clear. So, in all that discussion, the point I'm trying to make is as simple as to say it's Arsenal's Premier League title to lose. That's it. Now, not all Arsenal fans are going to believe it's done. In fact, I do not think a good number of them are going to believe it's done, because until they cross that line, they're going to live with the doubts, the memories that they've had for the last 3 campaigns in which they've finished second. They will know that they've been in a healthy position at the summit of the table before, and it slipped out of their hands, whether out of their own making or otherwise, whichever way you want to slice it or you want to believe it. So they will know that that has happened before. And with that said, it now takes us to the game today against Everton. I must say, for starters, that it was same old Arsenal. They dominated possession. They are not doing much with it. Somehow, you see, even when you're being dominant in a game of football, but then are not putting that ball across the line, you're not scoring the goals. You give your opponent all the confidence that they need to stay in the game. First of all, their first shot at goal came through Noni Madueke. That was around the 6th minute of the game when he tested Jordan Pickford. Now, after that, he struggled to repeat that kind of action, and yet I would have loved to see more of the same from him. Now, he's not entirely to blame, because what he struggled with today was, because he was played on the left wing, every time he cut back inside, it would put him on his right leg, which is his weaker foot. And I do not think he's practiced enough to be comfortable shooting on the right foot. He's comfortable shooting on his left. When you look at that, that attempt, that powerful shot that he has around the fifth, the 6th minute, it's on his weaker foot, but he had been accommodated a lot of space, and he had run the ball with a little bit, and he had momentum to it to to sort of put his power with his weaker foot. Now, for the majority of the game, he was denied that space. And therefore, he did not have impact. In fact, prior to him being withdrawn, that's when he had his second impactful moment of the game, because then he had moved right and he was cutting back in. And I remember telling the gentleman I was watching the game from, because before he gets withdrawn, when they returned for the second half, I wanted them to switch. I wanted for Ebeleche Eze to move to the left, Noni Madueke to go to the right, and then Bukayo Saka to come centrally and play where Ebeleche Eze was supposed to play in the 10-1. I wanted just teams do this all the time, or players have been known to do this when they switch wings and stuff like that. So I wanted to see that happen. Unfortunately, either it did not occur to them that they can switch, or they just did not want doing it at all, or one of them did not want to do it at all, because I'm sure Noni Madueke would have welcomed the suggestion. So it never happened for him. And therefore, by the time he gets withdrawn, he had very little impact on the game in terms of positively. And yet, to be fair to Mikel Arteta, when you have Ebeleche Eze, Noni Madueke, Bukayo Saka, and Kai Havertz on the pitch as your forwards, that's a bit of good firepower. Then, in the first half, like I said, Arsenal dominated possession, but they were not creating sufficient goal-scoring opportunities. In fact, Everton had the best chances of the first half. After Noni Madueke forced Jordan Pickford into a save, Everton's first chance came moments, sometime, I think, was it around the 16th minute or something, or thereabout or beyond? There was a cross in from, was it Dwight McNeil? I don't remember exactly. He puts in the cross and David Raya gets his hand to it. And when David Raya gets his hand to it, it falls for, it does not go far. It falls to an Everton player. And as they strike that ball, in fact, the cross was from Iliman Ndiaye. Yes, the cross was from Iliman Ndiaye. So he brings in the cross. David Raya gets his hand to it, but it doesn't go far. I think either it was Yamalenko or Kenan Drisbury Hall that was in that sort of area. It falls to him, and he goes for a powerful shot that could have easily ended up in the back of the net. Now, by the time that happens, for some reason, Ricardo Carafiori had slipped to the floor. And as he scrambled to pick himself up, he realizes Dwight McNeil, because Dwight McNeil was the player in there, is getting his shot off. And basically, what he did was stay down and hang up his leg. And that leg is what blocked the shot. And it turned out to be quite the brilliant block. I think one of the blocks of the game. Brilliant. It came off really, really brilliant. So, and it was really, really, Arsenal must have felt relieved on that. It must have really, really felt relieved, because I do not know whether David Raya would have gotten his fingers to it, or whether if he had gotten his fingers to it, would have managed to keep it out. Then, again, just moments later, Arsenal decide to sit back and ball watch as Nyakalenko drives the ball forward. You had Ricardo Carafiori sort of ball watching. You had Declan Rice, who had given up on the chess. You had Martin Zubimendi, who was trying to intervene, but was a bit a gap away. And Yamalenko strikes that ball quite sweetly, and it goes off the upright. And luckily for Arsenal, once it goes off the upright, the follow-up accidentally or unexpectedly fell for Ilman Ndiaye, and when he sort of taps it or makes contact with the ball, he cannot guide it into the back of the net, so it goes out because he was not expecting it in the first place, you know. Sorry, guys, it wasn't Nyakalenko. It was Brett McNeil. I don't know why I keep confusing the two guys. Maybe because they are both they were both good with their left feet today. But it was Brett McNeil. So, I mean, the curl he puts on that ball before it shakes the goalpost when it hits the upright was just incredible. And even though the touch for Ilman Ndiaye was accidental, it was close to getting in. So Arsenal once again escaped. Arsenal may have dominated possession in the first half, but Everton had the better chances. And it was not just one chance. In that, there were two chances in proximity of, I think, the 17th and 18th minute or 19th minute, thereabout. And then, after the half-hour mark, it happened again. It was, this time around, it was Kenan Brisbury Hall in front of the sort of the 18 yards box around the D area. He strikes the ball, and fortunately, David Raya was called into action and was there to collect the ball or to make the save. So, in typical Arsenal fashion, they were dominating the ball. They were leaving spaces. They were not playing as compact in terms of, because we've seen this Arsenal side play more compact than they have played in today's game or in their recent games. We've seen an Arsenal side that played and did not accommodate teams with any shot on target. Did not accommodate the teams with any shot on target. You remember Liverpool, that goalless draw at the Emirates Stadium? Liverpool did not have a shot on target. So really, and in typical Arsenal fashion, they had snafu moments that that they almost let themselves down. I remember a moment, I think in the second half, it happened with David Raya. I don't remember, but it happened with David Raya. They were, you know the thing they do, pass the ball backwards around, like that's where they intend to score, you know. Then also in the first half, I think Idris Gana Gueye had his attempt on goal, and you know, so the first half, while Arsenal were dominant, in the key aspects of the game in terms of ball possession, touches in the box, and things like that, it was Everton that was leading the way on the other side in creating what came off as meaningful chances. In the end, Arsenal had 7 shots on target compared to Everton's 3. They had 9 shots off target, that is Arsenal, compared to Everton's 2. Dominated possession to the tune of 64% compared to Everton's 36%, and things like that. They had 8 corner kicks compared to Everton's 3. So you can see it was a dominant performance from Arsenal. But when you look at the moments in which the goals actually come, that's what you need to know. Why I keep saying it was a typical Arsenal performance of dominating without creating meaningful chances, because they did not score until the 89th minute through Victor Gyökeres, you know. And even then, they had David Raya early in the second half. I remember it was a corner kick moment when he's forced into a double save. He punches the ball away. It doesn't go that far. And then, you know, scrappy moment in the box and, you know, he's forced into a save. On the other side, Arsenal appeared to be firing blanks. Their shots were being blocked, or at least once in a while, Jordan Pickford was at it, you know, making the saves. So, Mikel Arteta, like I told you, had played Tiba into injury, so he had brought in Mosquera. Ebelechi Eze had a couple of attempts that, you know, were close but not close enough. So he really tried to go from distance, and he did that on about two occasions in the second half. In one occasion, the ball is just inches wide of the mark, and then on another occasion, Pickford saves. And then we get to the 89th minute when Max Dowman floats in that ball. Now, when Max Dowman floats in the ball from the right wing, I'm thinking to myself, it's a normal cross. Somebody should be attacking that, but it's not going to yield much. I do not know what compelled Jordan Pickford to come out for that shot, for that cross, because it's not closer to him. And as it comes through, it's sort of squeezing in at the back end of the 16 yards box. Now, because he's miscalculated, he comes out and misses the ball. And the ball falls to Piero Hincapié. Because in that box, Arsenal had three players. Sorry, they had about four players in the box at the time of that cross. Bukayo Saka, who is closer to the edge of the 18 yards box. You had Victor Gyökeres in the box. You had Gabriel Martinelli and Piero Hincapié. Now, all those players were marked man-to-man with Victor Gyökeres, I think, in between two Everton players. But because Jordan Pickford has come out, miscalculated, he's missed the ball falls onto Piero Hincapié, who passes it back across, and Jordan Pickford is already out of goal, and it's an easy tap-in for Victor Gyökeres, and it's 1-0 in the 89th minute. So, when you see a 2-0 scoreline, please do not be persuaded to believe that, well, Arsenal, dominant performance, got their goals off the mark, and won as expected. No. Everton made them work for it. So, and then, a couple of minutes later, in added time, Gabriel Martinelli forced Jordan Pickford into a brilliant save. It's an attempt from outside the area. The ball was sort of creeping in would have crept in under the crossbar and ended up in the back of the net. So it was a brilliant save from Jordan Pickford. Now, in the 97th minute of the game, or thereabout, or 96th minute of the game, Everton get a corner kick, and of course they're chasing for an equalizer. And Jordan Pickford goes in the corner kick. So in other words, Everton do not have a single player in their goal or at the back. And I remember telling the gentleman that I was seated with that an Everton equalizer would hit differently. Because, first of all, it will dim the lights out of the eyes of the Arsenal fans inside that stadium and far beyond the stadium across the globe for all the Arsenal fans out there. But as soon as I said that, I told him also that Arsenal's second goal with an open net on the other side would hit differently. And I reminded him of Arsenal's third goal against Bayern Munich when Manuel Neuer was caught in no man's land. You remember Ebeleche Eze's pass to Gabriel Martinelli, and Manuel Neuer comes into to do his sweeping role, and the ball is nicked away from him, and Martinelli goes on to score into an empty net. Well, basically that's what's happened. So Everton take their corner kick, they do not score from it, and Arsenal go on a counter-attack. Max Dowman dribbled past somebody, and he went and scored in an empty net. Having provided the pre-assist in the first goal, he went and scored in an empty net. When he scores, I remember it was Gabriel Martinelli that was running with him and staying just a couple of inches behind him. And he did a little bit of shadow blocking in to let the youngster go on and score. But to be honest with you, Max Dowman, when he came on, he looked brilliant. He's just a fresh of breath air. For those of you that love to watch young kids play, because the beauty about watching young kids play is that they play with a lot of freedom. They are not preoccupied with of the experience of every time I meet this defender, they either do a number on me, they are so good defending against me, they are very physical, they are going to clip my ankles and things like that. They do not have anything of that memory, you know? They do not have anything in their memory. So they play their game as raw as you would have it. And usually at that point, they've not had any contact injuries, especially at this big level, that sort of they have to play with a bit of caution, with a bit of a handbrake. So he was just going about his business with a bit of easiness. I don't want to call it laxity because it wasn't that, but it was an epic performance from the youngster, only 16 years of age, just recently signed his scholarship contract with the Gunners, and yeah, it was a beautiful performance for him. And yeah, Arsenal won the game by 2-0, and that's what puts them in the good position at the summit of the Premier League table. Like I said, for me, from now on, it's Arsenal's title to lose. They have 7 games left to play. Their next game will be up against FC Bournemouth. And after that, I think after playing AFC Bournemouth, their next game will be away to Manchester City, one of the most difficult games that they will have until the end of the season. After that, they will play at home against Newcastle. Now you can see how difficult all those games are. Bournemouth is difficult because last season they went to the Emirates Stadium and beat up against Arsenal by 2-1. You remember Declan Rice's goal that turned out to be a mere consolation for the Gunners. So there's that history because Bournemouth is the only team that beat Arsenal home and away last season. Then Man City is away from home. We know, I've told you how difficult it has been over the years for Arsenal to go to the Etihad Stadium and win a game of football. The last time Arsenal went to the Etihad Stadium and won a game of football, to the best of my recollection, was probably around 2015. Olivier Giroud scoring in that game. I think Santi Cazorla had quite the performance of the night. Then after that, like I said, they play Newcastle at home. They will play Fulham at home. And then they'll play West Ham away. That's for their next 5 games out of the remaining 7. That means the other 2 games are against Crystal Palace and who else? The other is against Crystal Palace and who? Because Crystal Palace is their final game of the season, the very, very final game of the season. So I need to find out what the other game is for match day 37, probably. Yeah, it's against Burnley, and Burnley is at home. So you can see that the beauty for Arsenal is that out of their remaining 7 games, it's Man City is away. That's away from home. West Ham is away from home. And then which other game is away from home? Man City, Burnley, and I think Crystal Palace. Yeah, Crystal Palace is away from home. So those are the 3 away games that they have. Because in fact, on the closing day of the season, they'll be away from home. They'll be at Selhurst Park. So, and then, but the second last game of the season is at home against Burnley. In other words, it would do Arsenal all the favors if they were to win the game, the title, or to seal the title on match day 37 or prior to that, so that the celebrations are done at the Emirates Stadium as opposed to being done at Selhurst Park. Even though Crystal Palace is a London team, I think I would want to believe that if Arsenal were to go on and win the Premier League title, they would want to have their celebrations at the Emirates Stadium as opposed to having them away, away from home. I can see James BPJ says, let's celebrate what West Ham have done for us. We can definitely win the league now. James there seems to be speaking with a lot of confidence that they will be winning the league. Now, there's something new that I've noticed this season, or that is going to happen this season. And okay, well, maybe we'll get to that when it eventually comes. But like I said, James, it's Arsenal's title to lose, really. I do not think there's an Arsenal fan that would accept any reason or excuse or apology or justification sufficient enough for Arsenal dropping the ball, and particularly for Mikel Arteta dropping the ball. Like I've constantly reminded people, he celebrated 6 years with the team, and he's gone into his 7th year. Whatever, I remember when he had just walked through the doors, he talked about the process, and whatever that process was, we termed it as a project. And I remember him saying that, I don't remember how he phrased it, but he said, when this project goes bang, you'll see. Now, I do not know at what point it went bang or if it has ever gone bang, but I do not think there will be any reason sufficient enough for him to drop the ball. And you remember what I said in the start of this podcast, that Mikel Arteta is often animated on the touchline. But today, he was not animated because Arsenal were playing well, not because they were playing particularly bad, but he was animated because of the pressure. You know, when you have a lot of pressure, even in the coldest of weathers, you'll feel hot. That's what pressure does. That's what pressure makes you feel. Mikel Arteta took off his jacket and stayed, I think, in his t-shirt and a small sweater on. That is pressure. That is having something on the line. James says if we beat Man City next month, we win the league there and then. Wow. Now that you mention it, okay, I do not think that will be the case. I do not think that will be the case. But you know, Arsenal is one of the few sides that has won that have sealed the Premier League title away to Tottenham Hotspur, who are their arch nemesis. They've sealed a Premier League title at Old Trafford. I think that was 98. And then Tottenham Hotspur must have been what? The 2002 title? I stand to be corrected. Or one of that, or the 2004. And then the other was where? Was it at Anfield? I don't remember. But let's try and digest James's comment there for a moment, with a couple of assumptions, of course, because it is based on assumptions, as he assumes that if, because the keyword there is if they beat Manchester City at the Etihad Stadium. First of all, Arsenal have to play Manchester City. That's next weekend in the Cup final. That's going to be a huge game. And whatever the result is in that game will sort of be the precursor to the game at the Etihad Stadium. In other words, if Manchester City beat Arsenal next weekend and win the Carabao Cup, Arsenal will go to the Etihad Stadium hoping to plot their revenge. And if there's, I don't know if you guys have noticed, if you do a number on Mikel Arteta, he never forgets. He sort of keeps that at the back of his mind, waiting to pounce at the right opportunity to execute his revenge. He has that element of it. He knows how to motivate his, and how that started. That was at the start of the 2021-2022 Premier League season, when they went on to lose the opening 3 games against Brentford, Chelsea, and Man City. But particularly, it was a Brentford game because Brentford were a newly promoted side, and they hosted the game at the GTEC Stadium. It was a Friday night. It was the opening game of the season, 2021-2022 season. So he had some of his players contract COVID-19. So in other words, they were not eligible to play, or they could not play in that game. And they wrote to the Premier League requesting the fixture to be rescheduled. And the Premier League said, no, not a chance. Regardless of how many players you have with COVID, you still have a squad or a team fully comprised to come and play. So they went and played at the GTEC Stadium and lost by 2-0. In the aftermath of that, Ivan Toney went to his social media, I don't remember whether it was X or Instagram, whatever it was, and put nice kick about with the boys in celebrating that victory because it was their first game in the Premier League and they beat Arsenal. You know how big that is for a newly promoted team, whether you're being promoted to the Premier League for the first time or you're returning. You know that kind of feeling if you're a newly promoted side. And ever since then, the games between Arsenal and Brentford have always been major battles because of that, because it's always a moment for revenge. And particularly that season and the subsequent season, but particularly that season, he never stopped reminding them of the nice kick about with the boys, that tweet. So, in other words, even though Mikel Arteta and Pep Guardiola are friends, of course, both products of Castilla. Is that the Barcelona academy? No, Castilla is Real Madrid, right? Oh, guys, somebody remind me the Barcelona academy. You know, I'm forgetting the name for the Barcelona academy. It's called what? There's a name for it. La Masia, yes, La Masia. So they are both products of the La Masia Academy. So they have that friendship, and then they went on to work together. And before, a lot of people seem to think that Mikel Arteta started working with Pep Guardiola when he came to Manchester City. No, he had started working for Pep Guardiola long before that, either formally or informally, whichever way you want to call it. Every time Pep Guardiola was going, his Barcelona side was going to face a team from the Premier League, he would request Mikel Arteta to write for him a scouting report, it's a scouting report on their opponent, and he would use that to prepare for that game. So they've known each other long enough, and then they work together, of course, with Mikel Arteta as his understudy, as his assistant, and they have a good relationship. So even though that's the case, if Arsenal were to lose the Carabao Cup final, he would go to the Etihad Stadium with that spirit of revengefulness to do a number on his a master. But also, if Arsenal were to beat Manchester City in the Carabao Cup final and win their first major piece of silverware since 2020, a run during which, before they beat Chelsea in the final, they had beaten up against Manchester City in the semi-finals, that equally would be epic. It would mean that Manchester City would want to avoid at all costs losing a final to Arsenal, which meant losing a title, and then also being the team that loses a game, or being them that get beaten for Arsenal to seal their Premier League title. So you understand what I mean. So whichever way it ends next Sunday, the game at the Etihad Stadium is bound to be epic for those reasons that I've just highlighted. You know, it's bound to be epic for all those reasons. Now, any of the teams can win both fixtures. That's it. That's possible. One can end in a draw, and it is just a draw. That's the Etihad Stadium game. The one at Wembley, it can only end with one team winning. LFC says, yes, Robert, I'm back. Good to have you back. You say, sad about the France winning. Sad about France winning Six Nations, not Ireland. Okay, sorry about that. But yeah, so really, whichever way it ends, James, I think I've painted the perfect scenario for you guys to comprehend that in as far as things are concerned. So really, just know Arsenal need to do two things. Actually, they need to do one thing prior to playing the final next Sunday. They need to win against Bayer Leverkusen. whichever way, at whatever cost. They need to win that. If they do win that, they'll go into the cup final with a little less pressure. A little less. I don't mean to say there won't be pressure. There'll be enormous pressure. Why? Because it's a final. A lot is at stake. A title is at stake. But once they guarantee that they've qualified for the quarterfinals, that will give them a bit of confidence going into that game. And that's why I say there'll be a little bit less pressure if that were to be the case. So yeah, that's the importance of those games. Anyways, guys, let's move on. I think we said it all with Max Dowman and Arsenal. Perhaps I'll be waiting for more feedback from Arsenal fans out there to let me know what their thoughts are about what this weekend's results mean for the rest of the season in their own context as the table leaders, and then also in the grand scheme of things in terms of does it bring more confidence? Does it make them more nervous? Because you see, the closer you are to the finishing line, the more pressure you're under to get over that line. For those of you that have ever run a marathon or a relay or if you have ever done any athletics in the form of running, you know that the closer you are to the finishing line, especially if there's somebody chasing you, the more pressure you feel. You know that you cannot afford to stumble. You have to keep your head straight. You cannot turn to look back to see who is even chasing you. You just want to go and get over the finishing line. That's what you need. So basically, that's what it's going to be for this Arsenal side, you know? Anyways, quickly. So action does continue tomorrow. But before we even go into tomorrow's action, here's what happened in the Spanish La Liga. Girona beat up against Athletic Bilbao by 3-0. Atletico de Madrid won against Getafe by 1-0. Real Oviedo beat Valencia by 1-0, while Real Madrid just put 4 past Elche. Bayer Leverkusen in the German Bundesliga shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw against a 10-man Bayern Munich side, for whom Nicolas Jackson and Luis Diaz were sent off. Borussia Dortmund beat up against Augsburg by 2-0. Eintracht Frankfurt beat up against Heidenheim by 1-0, while Hoffenheim and Wolfsburg settled for a 1-1 draw. Wolfsburg among the relegation teams in the German Bundesliga. I think second from bottom or something. Hamburg SV and Cologne shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw, as did Inter Milan against Atlanta. Inter Milan-Atlanta was quite the epic encounter, by the way, because Atlanta had a goal ruled out in that game. Was it? And then, anyway, it was a 1-1 draw. In that one, Christian Chiv was given a red card because he thought the goal they conceded through Kristovic shouldn't have stood. There was a push on Denzel Dumfries in the box, so while Esposito had scored to give Inter Milan the lead. Now, the reason as to why that game is important, by the way, let me first finish the Italian Serie A results. Napoli beat up against Lecce by 2-1, while Juventus won away to Udinese by 1-1. Now, the reason as to why that result is very significant in the Italian Serie A is what it means on the on the Italian Serie A table. Why? Last weekend was the Milan derby. That is the derby della Madonnina. Yes. AC Milan won that one by 1-0. That goal scored by Pavice Stupinan. Now, Inter Milan, prior to the start of the Milan derby, were 10 points clear at the summit of the Italian Serie A. With the loss to AC Milan, that deficit was reduced to 7 points. Because they've drawn this weekend, that means if AC Milan win their game this weekend, March the 29th, it would put them to 63 points. It would simply mean that that deficit of 10 points has been reduced to a mere 5. A mere 5 with 9 games left to play. So you can see what is at stake for Inter Milan there, and why Christian Chivu was really, really furious that that goal was left to stand against Atlanta. So that's the context there. Laurier will be beat up against Lens by 2-1. I think the happiest party for this result will be PSG, because Lens are the ones are just a point behind PSG in this French League One standings are there. So if they had won today, they would have gone above PSG by 2 points. So they lost, and PSG remained at the summit. Really, PSG have a game to play because they did not play this weekend, because they requested their fixture to be rescheduled. I don't remember who it's supposed to be against, but they requested for their fixture to be rescheduled because they have that reverse fixture against Chelsea on Tuesday night. Then Angers lost to Nice by 2-0, just as much as Monaco beat Brest by 2-0. So those were the results from the other top 5 leagues across Europe. And, so action does continue tomorrow. So do not miss out on that action. In the Premier League, at 5 p.m., we'll have 3 games. Crystal Palace up against Leeds United, Manchester United against Aston Villa, while Nottingham Forest will be up against Fulham. Then at 7:30 p.m., Liverpool will play at Tottenham Hotspur. So do not miss out on any of that. Then in the Spanish La Liga, at 4 p.m., Mallorca will be up against Espanyol. Barcelona at 5:45 p.m. will be up against Sevilla. Betis against Celta Vigo, while Sociedad will take on Osasuna in the late kickoff. German Bundesliga, Werder Bremen will be up against Mainz 05. Freiburg will be up against Union Berlin, while VfB Stuttgart will take on RB Leipzig. And then in the Italian Serie A, Hellas Verona will take on Genoa. That's at 2:30 p.m. Pisa will be up against Cagliari. Sassuolo up against Bologna, while Como will take on AC Roma. That's at 8 p.m. But the other 2 games will come at 5 p.m. And then in the late kickoff, AC Milan will be away to Lazio. So if AC Milan win that game, they can go within 5 points behind Inter Milan. So that's the significance of those fixtures going into the rest of the weekend. Guys, allow me wrap it up here, and I wish you a blessed night. Thank you so much, LFC. Thank you so much, James BPG, Raymond. Thank you so much, Joseph, Ben, BRX, and every single one of you that managed to catch tonight's podcast. Thank you so much for keeping me company. Thank you so much for giving me the reason to come and be here with you every single night. Today we were 1 hour and about 16 minutes late, but I thank you for indulging me to stay with us for this podcast. So please keep it up. Turn your notifications on so you'll be notified every time we go live. And yeah, we do this every single day, Monday to Sunday. For the late night broadcast, we come at 11 p.m. East African time. Apart from Friday, on Friday we come at 9 p.m. As we do the weekend preview, and then of course the other days, Monday to Saturday we come in the morning at 9 a.m. Then on Saturdays we come at 10 a.m. So please keep that in mind. Keep subscribing, keep liking, keep sharing. The more you comment on our content, the more it's recommended to wider audiences of similar interests. So keep doing that. Invite your friends to subscribe, to like our content, and help us continue to grow on this forum, the Football Tribe UG channel. For those of you from far between, those from Spain, Team India, those from Pakistan, USA, South Africa, Nigeria, I've had a couple of friends from Kenya, Uganda here on home soil. What other country? I've had somebody from Nepal. I've had people from Bangladesh. I've had somebody from Indonesia. I've had people from the UK, Scotland, Ireland. Thank you so much for choosing the Football Tribe UG channel. So allow me wish you a wonderful rest of the night, and we'll do this again tomorrow at night. Bye-bye for now. Thank you.